Welcome to the Billion Insight podcast. I'm your host Sri. Today we are excited to welcome Dr. Mary Trudeau, who is a renowned environmentalist, a civil engineer with over 30 years of experience in environmental consulting, particularly in water management and urban infrastructure. She is not only expert in her field but also an educator, an author, a speaker, and a passionate advocate for reconnecting with our planet. We are thrilled to have her on the show today to share her incredible journey and valuable insights that will inspire you to think about our environment in a new way. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Mary Trudeau to the show. So welcome, ma'am. Welcome to the Billion Insight podcast.
Oh, thank you, Sri. I'm really happy to be speaking with you today, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on your podcast.
Thanks for joining us, ma'am. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on our show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, ma'am, can we start from the beginning? Let's start with your childhood.
Okay. Yeah, that really is the beginning. So I'm in Ottawa. I live in Ottawa, Canada. I wasn't born here, but I was born in a fairly small city in the Ottawa Valley. So there's the Ottawa River, quite large river that flows into the St. Lawrence and then into the Atlantic Ocean. So I've grown up by water, and I'm one of 5 children in my family, the second of 5. And we moved to Ottawa when I was about 3 or 4 because my father got a job with the federal government, the Canadian government. My mother was a nurse, but she stopped nursing as a career when she started having children. And yeah, from there it's fairly, I guess, good childhood. We went to cottages when I was a kid in the summers, and I was pretty good at school, but I didn't particularly like high school. Got out of that as soon as I could, and then went into engineering is when I finished my school career. So yeah, I have lots of fun. I love having 4 siblings. And my mother is luckily still around and in good health. So
fantastic. So, if I'm not mistaken, you are in your 50s?
Oh no, I'm not. I'm older than that.
Really? Okay.
But I'm not going to tell you just how old.
Okay. No, it's completely up to you. But I'm thought that you might be your late 40s or 50. But
well, thank you.
So, ma'am, can you tell us about your background, how you become interested in civil engineering?
Well, it started, I actually was originally in high school, I thought I would be a biologist. And the University of Ottawa had a day for students to go and kind of see what they were interested. So you could choose 2 different modules. And I went to the biology one, and they had butterflies stuck on pins in this really stifling lab. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's so not what I want to do. And the engineering was the other one that I chose, and they had water jumps, and they had channels, and I that's when I started to rethink really what I wanted to study. My father was an engineer, but an engineering physicist, and I do have an aptitude for math and physics. So that's when I signed on for civil engineering, and it just sort of connected with my natural love of water. So for 15 years, I managed, after I became an engineer, I managed water infrastructure at a municipality. So the drinking water system, I managed maintenance and operations of different parts of the water system, the drinking water system. And then I moved to managing a surface water monitoring program and an analytical lab. So that gave me a really good foundation for the consulting work that I do now for connecting science-informed policy.
Interesting. This is one connection I guess we both have shared. That is, my father was also civil engineer. There is many people from my family who is into this profession, but except me, I am a computer science engineer.
That's very good for today. Yeah, in civil engineering, I mean, there's lots of different types of civil engineering, from structural right through to water resources. So it's quite. I find it just gives a really good foundation. Engineering in general, I would recommend it if somebody's not sure what they want to do, but they have an aptitude for math and physics. It just gives you a really good a good platform, then you don't have to be an engineer. You can do something else, that strikes your fancy.
Yeah. So, ma'am, I have some rudimentary question about the environment. I would like to start by asking you, can you explain what is climate change and why is such a critical issue for our planet?
Okay, so the first thing to know about the environment is that everything's connected. We like to think of, the water cycle and maybe nutrients and soils. We like to think of and ourselves as all these different parts, and we can think of them as separate, but in reality, everything is really, really, really closely connected. And so if you change one thing, then you have a change in all kinds of other things that, and in some cases, are very unexpected. So climate change is related to carbon, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And when we burn, they're called fossil fuels. Basically, we're pulling old plant material up out of the ground, and it's mostly carbon. So the planet has natural ways to, it's called sequester, to capture and hold elements that are in abundance. So over the years, as a tree or another plant dies, the the earth takes in all of those the substances within that plant and holds it in the earth. And so carbon is one of the things that's held in the earth when a plant dies. Now what we're doing, because when carbon is held in the earth in a certain form, it turns into oil. We've been pulling that oil and gas, natural gas, out of the earth, burning it, which means it goes into the atmosphere. And what that does is it puts more carbon into the atmosphere than the planet has balance for. And so the reaction is the extra carbon in the air holds in more sunlight. It's like sitting in a car in a warm day. If you have all the windows up, it gets really, really hot inside. And that's because the heat comes into the car and it can't get out because of the windows. And a similar thing happens when the sunlight comes into the earth. If there's that much carbon in the atmosphere, the heat can't escape the same way, and so it gets warmer. But it used to be called global warming, but now it's called climate change because of recognizing it's not just about temperature. The carbon also affects the chemical balance of the ocean. So the ocean are getting a little bit more acid because the carbon, the water's taking up, the ocean water is taking up some of the carbon, and that's changing it's called the pH, so the acidity level of the ocean. So the oceans are changing, the oceans are warming, they're absorbing some of the warmth, and all of these things affect wind and the way, we see changes in monsoons and more intense rainstorms, because warmer air holds more water, which means we get these more water in the atmosphere. So we get these really intense, heavy rainstorms in a way that were quite rare before, and now they're more common. So, and then of course there's animals that are affected. If it gets, for example, in Canada, because it's warmer, ice at the end of winter is melting sooner than before, and that changes all the triggers that, like, fish get a different signal. Oh, I have to migrate now. It's April instead of May. It's just, I can't even begin to touch on the number of changes that are triggered by a change in carbon in the atmosphere.
Yeah. So, ma'am, since we are talking about climate change, can you explain us what carbon footprint is?
A carbon footprint is the estimate of how much carbon a certain activity will take. So my specialization is water more than carbon, and there's also a water footprint. So how much water does something take? So it's really just an estimate of how much an impact is. So for example, there's online tools where people can estimate their resource use, and if everybody on the planet used resources at that rate, how many planets we would have to have in order to sustain that activity. And usually it's three, four, or even more planets, because of the impact, the footprint. A footprint is an impression that's left on the ground. And so a carbon footprint or a water footprint is it's just a way of saying how much how much carbon an activity or a person or a household is using.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest issue which is going on. Many people are not aware of this thing.
Yeah, I think awareness is growing. Certainly, I mean, we've known since the 80s for sure. The first theory goes even before that, but certainly it was very clear in the 1980s that this was a thing that was happening. And it's been quite frustrating being in the environmental field to not see people understanding. But now I think they are. I think the awareness that something is changing has grown quite a bit in the last 10 years.
Talking about the awareness, we have had water and pollution awareness program for many years. Even I have observed many institutions in my country, like NGO, government initiative, are promoting awareness regarding the pollution and water waste, all the climate change thing. So we celebrate Engineers Day in every year, September 15. By the way, it is on the near. We celebrate it is a tribute to one of our great engineer. To respect his contribution, we celebrate his birthday as an Engineers Day, which is primarily organized by the Institution of Engineers India, which is one of the world's largest engineering professional society. In fact, I am also a member of this institution. Regardless of which engineering discipline we belong to, it emphasizes the importance of coming together and finding solution to the common problem. Like every year, we come up with a different theme, and this year the theme is driving sustainability with engineering solution, embracing the latest AI-driven technology. This event will take place across India and will be attended by the millions of people. I'm sure that such event will be placed in your country also. So my question is, how effective do you think these programs have been? As human, are we getting better at managing water and handling pollution? Or do you think that awareness alone is not enough? We need to find more effective ways to address this global issue, such as implementing stricter regulation,
Yeah. I think it has to be a combination of things. So, I mean, people have to accept regulation, or certainly in a democracy, then if the politicians go too fast, then they won't get voted back in. So awareness is the first step. And also, I think this is actually the reason I wrote my children's book is we really need to appreciate our planet. And when we do that, it's not, it's less of a burden. Oh, I have to, drive less. It becomes, oh, I want to drive less because I really love my planet. And the engineering solutions can kind of follow from there because we know how to collect rainwater. We know how to grow natural plants instead of non-native plants, in gardens. There's a lot of things that our ancestors did that we can reinstate, but we have this impression that somehow we're separate from the environment, and somehow engineering solutions are separate from the environment, but they're all part. Certainly the water system's part of the planet. It's an intricate part of the planet. So any engineering solutions for water have to recognize that water is a cycle. And certainly in Canada, we haven't done a good job of that. We treat wastewater as if it's completely separate from drinking water. When we put the wastewater, treated wastewater into a lake, but then we're pulling out that same water for treating for drinking. And we're starting to see some of the drugs, for example, trace aspirin even showing up in drinking water because it's all the same water. And so our solutions have to recognize interconnectedness of everything on the planet, and we go from there.
So, ma'am, you mentioned that there are many things that are contaminated with water. You mentioned that aspirin is one of that thing which found in water. So my question is, how does aspirin get mixed with water? Is it from medical waste that got mixed up with water? Another question is, what are some other water-related problems that are not widely known?
So the aspirin, any drug that you take, any drug that any person takes, is processed in the kidneys. And so there's always some that comes out in the urine, like it just ends up in the wastewater. And wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove those things. So we have, and some of those substances affect the hormone system, the endocrine system of plants, of fish and other aquatic animals in the water. So there's pollutants from wastewater, treated wastewater, but there's also not only a water quality issue, it's a water quantity issue. So the amount of water that runs off a cityscape is completely different from the amount of water that runs off if it's a forest or a grassland or even a farm. If you think of a street that's paved and the amount of rain that hits that street, all of it goes usually into a river. It doesn't, or a little creek. It doesn't go into a wastewater treatment plant. It just goes out into the environment. And if you think of, if you have a liter of water and somebody throws it to you, like it's pretty heavy. So if you think of that amount of water times thousands that's running off a street and into a natural water course, it blows out the stream. Like that water hits that little river, and it changes the shape, and it also flows off faster, which means it flows into the next, ultimately the oceans faster. And so during dry periods, there's less water in the ground. So it changes the water balance in the soils, and it also changes the habitat for the fish in the river, because the water flowing fast, it picks up the pebbles or substrate, that whatever type of soil is at the bottom of the river, it picks that up and it pushes it downstream. And so once you have those changes, you have a change in habitat. So different fish can live in the river, and also you have a temperature change, because cities tend to be warmer than country areas on hot days. And certainly paved streets anyway, are warmer. And so when the water hits those streets, it warms up, and warm water holds less oxygen, certain fish that can only live in cool water systems. So the water cycle is not only a problem of water quality, it's a problem of water quantity, water being held in soils, water being held by plants, water availability for things like agriculture, for example, if it flows off fast. So again, everything's so connected that if we change a piece of land from a meadow to a street, immediately we have changes to the water cycle and things that live in the water.
Yes, aquatic animals are suffering because of the pollution. You also mentioned that there is not enough water in cities compared to forests. Absolutely. Here in India, lately we have observing the record-breaking temperature. The groundwater in many major cities has greatly reduced. So ma'am, since the earth is 71% of water and 29% of land, why haven't we humans solved the water issue yet? Why can't we just make seawater drinkable? Or do you think to make seawater drinkable in the scale would be expensive due to the current technology?
Okay, so the issue of, it's called desalination, taking the salt out of seawater. And there are a lot of coastal cities using that technology. I guess, like anything, there's a downside to it, right? So for example, where does all that salt go? What happens when the salt is taken out? Generally, it's put back into the sea. That increases the salt concentration in the sea, which changes the circulation patterns, it changes the habitat. So if we're going to have those types of engineering solutions, then we also have to consider the full cycle again, because that water, once we remove whatever isn't drinkable in that water, and there's huge amounts of it, if you're supplying a whole city with desalinated water, the consequences are the salt and also the energy that's used to drive the process to remove the salt. And then, of course, the expense. So it sounds easy, but you implement it in a city to supply a large population, then those consequences are quite serious and need to be addressed.
If we find a way to dispose those amount of salts, maybe put it back, or maybe a particular area buried under the ground, maybe that will have the solution, but then will have the different problem. So
yeah, then you're increasing the salinity.
Yeah.
Like it's going somewhere out of balance with what it was before.
Yep.
And there will always be a consequence. And that doesn't mean that we can't do anything. It just means that we have to recognize, like we've been surprised in the past. It's, a surprise that an animal goes extinct if we harvest too much of it, or, and I think we need to to stop that, we need to understand that everything that we do is connected to the planet. And if we're going to make a major change, it will have an effect. And we need to plan for that effect and plan ahead and really look at the pros and cons and maybe also the needs of the planet a little bit more before we fully implement something. So for example, desalination for the population drinking, but not desalination for industrial processes. For example, the industrial processes have to figure out some other way to use salt water, or to, like, if we assume that all of the what we currently use purified water for should be supplied by desalination, then we're not making a decision in favor of the planet. We're making a decision in favor of the economy. And that's where we've made mistakes in the past, is only considering economy, not fully considering environment.
Yep. While addressing one problem, we often indirectly create another problem.
Exactly. And just to give you an example, so this isn't my field of expertise, but some of the articles that I've read about these giant wind farms, off the coast of offshore areas, there's some evidence that the seed dispersal that normally happens from wind is reduced. So we're taking energy out of the wind, and it's, an environmental choice. But the consequence is that wind energy isn't distributed over the land anymore downstream of those wind turbines, and there may be an effect on the plants that grow downstream, and bird migrations, those kinds of things. Like we need to expect that there will be an effect, and we need to investigate to find that effect so that we can counteract it in some way, if possible, or at least acknowledge that that's a consequence of our decision to generate energy by wind, for example. And I'm not saying we don't build wind farms. I'm just saying there are consequences for everything. Everything, even the green solutions, right?
So, ma'am, our body, the human body, is a fascinating piece of engineering created by God. If it senses something wrong, then it will give us some subtle signals like rashes, hair loss, or pimples. This way our body is telling us, hey, there is something wrong with your gut or maybe with your liver. You should address that before it's too late. Similarly, our Mother Earth communicates with us through various means, such as natural events like cyclones, flood, drought, landslide, which are the signs that there is something wrong with our environment. We should act upon it.
Yes, that's right.
This leads to a thought that with more than 7 billion people living on this planet, don't you think the Earth is not designed to accommodate those large number of people? This is why we are seeing some side effect like in the form of natural disaster. Or do you think there is no problem with this? We can easily accommodate more people on our planet easily.
Well, I personally believe that there is a way to make it work. The issue is the amount of resources that some of the people are using compared to others. So it's not that there's 7 billion people, it's that there's a portion of the population that drive, everywhere rather than walk or public transport. Like the amount of resources that we're using is not sustainable. And there's a lot of people, I'm sure, in India and in villages in the continent, African continent, where they have local resources. They're self-sustaining in a local way, where they they eat foods that are grown locally, and their modes of transport are they don't use cars as much.
Yeah.
So I think it's too simplistic to say, oh, it's the number of people. It's the amount of resources that are being used. And certainly in Canada, we have a drive culture. We drive everywhere. And that's more of an issue than the number of people.
Yeah, absolutely. A small portion of population are making the big impact. And we create things for our benefit. Like just you mentioned the car. We made it for our convenience. But this ultimately leads to suffering for our own planet. Our Mother Earth is telling us through this various signs that, hey, you need to cut your uses.
Yeah, cut back a little bit. Think about balance, you know.
People are says that the electric vehicle is the solution, but the to generate those electricity for those vehicle, we are not making through the green, right? It's not like that we the producing the electricity is completely green.
Yeah, I'm not on the electrical vehicle bandwagon by any means. We have to mine a lot of rare earth
Yeah.
minerals to make batteries. We don't have sufficient battery recycling technology. I mean, this is my field of expertise, but looking at it just kind of as an informed outsider, it's insane that we want to take individual internal combustion engine cars and go to individual electric vehicles and think that it's going to be a solution. You know, if we said all of our mass transit is going to be electric, so the buses and the trains, electrify those, and de-emphasize the individual vehicle, like, you know, car ownership for the individuals, that might make sense. But it, you know, the electricity is generated from somewhere. And if it's nuclear power,
Yeah.
like in Ontario, then you have a waste stream that some of it has a half-life of 20,000 years. Like, we don't even know how long that is.
Yeah.
So there's nuclear, some of it's natural gas, in Canada generate. That's a fossil fuel. Some of it is coal generated. If you have coal generated electricity, that's like the dirtiest form of fossil fuel there is. So, you know, you can't just look at the scale of the individual vehicle. You have to look at the scale of the grid, and also the footprint of mining what it takes to make a battery. So it's just, to me, fiction, and it's political. It's a political message to say, oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. You just need to buy an electrical vehicle. No, it's just not true.
Yeah, absolutely. One way or other, we are doing the same thing, but in a different way, in a disguised way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like
Yeah,
you
and
mentioned, yeah, the nuclear waste. Yeah, one way we are generating the green energy, but what about those waste? We haven't have a solution for that, how to dispose those waste properly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and calling nuclear energy green is a very, very recent thing. Like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was anything but green because of the radioactive waste. Now it's called green because it's got a lower carbon footprint once it's generated. But when you look at the concrete that goes into building a nuclear power station, it's massive. And concrete, that is a source of greenhouse gas emissions. So you know, there's a difference between the operating energy and what's called the embodied energy, the energy that it takes to actually make a thing. So the energy that it takes to make a nuclear power plant, or the energy that it takes to make an electric car, those things are often not considered. And that energy, even the energy that it takes to make a wind turbine, right now, it's taking carbon to make wind turbines. We're using carbon-based energy to make solar panels. So sooner or later, we have to generate enough energy with the green energy to get off of the carbon-based energy. And I've never seen an analysis that says, okay, this is the carbon we need to set aside to make enough green energy sources to get off carbon. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're we're not taking a completely analytical approach, in my opinion.
Yep. Yep. We have to find the proper green solution. I do remember once Elon Musk said that the human population is in declining state, which is very bad for our planet, he mentioned. I'm not sure what he actually meant by this, but what I see is the opposite. The population is growing and more people are getting wealthier. Slowly, they are able to afford this thing which previously they were not. As more and more people buy car, the load on the environment will only increase.
Yeah.
Unless we solve and minimize the carbon footprint thing.
Yeah. Well, this is where we really do need political leadership to put a price on carbon,
Yeah.
so that it looks like it's affordable, because right now the planet is subsidizing that use of a vehicle. It's subsidizing in the sense that, you know, climate change is happening because the cars look affordable. But if the cost of an electric vehicle or an internal combustion engine vehicle actually reflected the cost of the planet, it wouldn't be affordable, and people would have to find alternative routes. Then all of a sudden it looks better to take public transit.
Yeah.
So we haven't really had strong political leadership to, we've started putting a price on carbon in Canada, but it's quite controversial. And I think around the world, there are some countries that have really been successful in decreasing their carbon use because they've had an increasing price on carbon. So it's this that, as long as somebody thinks, oh yeah, it's totally affordable for me to buy an electric vehicle, then we know that there's a problem in the economy. The economic signals are not aligned with the planetary signals.
Yep. As long as the vehicle price is up, then it's okay. Increase the price of fuel or electricity, then that will have a negative impact on the economy.
Yeah, but we have an economy that assumes there's no planetary limits, like growth. It's infinite growth. The economy's grown again. This is good news. Well, if it's growing because of resource use, then that at some point has to stop. But if it grows because of services, somebody provides a service, then there's going to be some, I don't know, energy use because of the servers for the computer or whatever. But if it's growing because of energy use and water use and other mineral use, at some point it's got to stop growing because of that.
Yep, absolutely. So, ma'am, have you come across the project in Saudi Arabia called the Neom Project, the line project? They build a city. They are going to build a city in a single straight line.
Just in a brief news clip. I wasn't sure it was real, actually. I thought it was one of these online shows.
Yep. I have a guest on our podcast from Saudi Arabia. When I asked him about this project and how people in Saudi think about it, he replied that yes, everybody is excited and the government is recruiting people for it. The project is going super fast. This is what the local insights I got from him. Only time will tell what will happen to that project, but I would say it looks really cool and at the same time unusual.
Well, I don't understand why it would be a straight line and not a circle. Like, what if one person at one end of the city wants to get to the other end of the city? Like, a circle is, you can have a hub. That's how, all the old roads were built. Like, if you look at Paris, there's a central hub and things go out. You would use the same amount of land area potentially, but have like a central hub. I'm not familiar with the logic behind it.
That's a great point, I would say. If someone from the Neom Project watching this, they have to answer this question.
Yeah, no, the transportation. And what if a fire breaks out? Like, how do you do fire suppression?
Yeah.
Where do you keep your fire engines? I don't know. Is there a hospital? Like, how do people get to a hospital? Is it in the middle? You have to wheel somebody all the way through the city? I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that the circular state. This kind of remind me the Apple Park. You know the Apple Park, right? The headquarters, the HQ of Apple. They made it in circular state and they put every plant inner part of the circle completely green, filled with trees.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen that. It sounds nice. Trees in the middle.
Yeah, tree in the middle. So, ma'am, talking about the climate change. So, how does climate change affect the urban water infrastructure?
Well, one of the things is called heat island effect, where cities are normally warmer anyway because there's fewer trees and less vegetation and more asphalt and roofs. And so those kinds of things, certainly asphalt is black, it absorbs heat. So an urban area is naturally warmer, and in climate change, it gets even warmer, and that has problems for vulnerable people who can get heat stroke. It can affect energy use as well. If people have air conditioned spaces, they tend to use more energy, and you have this sort of reinforcing, you're using more energy because it's hotter, but it's hotter because you're using more energy. And also, you have warmer air, so you have higher evaporation rates. So you can tend to get warmer or drier soils. And if the soils are too dry, then when it does rain, you get the large rainfalls and all of it runs off rather than a sort of a gentle rain where it will replenish the soils. It tends to run off. So it changes the water cycle. It changes the temperature that people are living in. It changes the energy that's used within the urban area. It changes people's health. So yeah, again, lots of interconnected consequences
Yep, yep.
for changing climate.
So, ma'am, talking about the urban infrastructure, can you explain what is green infrastructure is?
Okay. Yeah, so green infrastructure, different organizations define it slightly differently. But in general, it's in a city, green infrastructure is called that because often it is literally green. So, for example, grass or some kind of vegetation on a roof that will absorb water, take up water, provide some cooling, and also sequester carbon. There is an engineering requirement to have a stronger roof. If you're going to have plants and soils and that kind of thing on a roof, then you need to have a stronger structure to support it. So it's slightly more expensive. But that can reduce the heat island effect because you have green roofs. Similarly, on streets, rather than just have all the water run off into a storm sewer, if you put little islands of plants so that the water runs into an area with vegetation, it slows it down, it filters out pollutants in the water, and it allows the water to more slowly go into the sewer system. So, and again, they're green. They can be plants, flowers, trees, small trees. So the more of those that there are, where when it rains, the water can go into these little vegetation areas, the better it is for the temperature of the water, the quality of the water, and the quantity of the water. So those are just two examples of green infrastructure, on roofs and on streets that can try to reintroduce some sort of natural vegetation back into the city rather than just paving everything and hardening every surface with asphalt or roofing material. And same with, private sort of parking areas, like if there's a shopping area or whatever with a parking lot, rather than have just solid asphalt, there can be sort of broken up like
Paper blocks.
paving blocks so that the water can infiltrate in
Yep.
between those. And why we don't have solar panels on our parking lots. It's a great opportunity to also collect some solar energy and provide shade for cars. So there are things that we can do in cities to reintroduce a little bit of the natural environment that we've taken out. That's green infrastructure.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, ma'am, while researching this podcast, I came across your TEDx talk, which is so insightful, I would say.
Oh, thanks.
So, you mentioned that the famous river Thames in London, often called the cleanest river in the world, home to the iconic landmark like the London Eye, was biologically dead in 1950s, and after significant investment by the government, life returned to that river. So I have few questions about this. First, could you explain what it means by the biologically dead and what caused this condition?
Yeah, so in the 1950s, nothing could live in the Thames River. It had formerly had salmon and otter, all kinds of different creatures, but it was so polluted. It was like a sewer. Nothing could live in that river. And so there were bacteria and protozoa and like small creatures, but the larger fish and other animals couldn't live in the river. So that's why it was called biologically dead. And it happened because of centuries of just assuming that waste belongs in the river. So industrial waste, human waste, runoff from the streets, all of those problems, and increased temperature as well, all of those that cumulative effect killed the river. By the 1950s, yeah, it was biologically dead.
So, ma'am, from biologically dead to the cleanest river of the world, so how they recovered the Thames River?
Yeah. So the first step was people said, no, we do not want a biologically dead river. We don't accept that it's going to be biologically dead. And that inspired decision makers to create a whole suite of measures to reverse the effects of the pollution. So they worked, for example, with farmers to take care to reduce the amount of fertilizers running off their lands, to reduce things like cattle directly in streams. So if they have access to water that isn't in a river, it's much better for the river. They worked with different cities and towns to store stormwater so that it doesn't just run off, and to reduce the amount of stormwater running off. They worked with people to raise their awareness about how they're connected to the river. And it costs billions of pounds. And they have 100-year plan, a 100-year plan to improve the quality of the river, because we got into this situation over more than 100 years. So it's going to take time. It's not like a 5-year plan. It's not a 10-year plan. The beauty, if you want, of a 100-year plan is that it communicates to the public, we're spending this money now to fix it, but it's not going to happen, this spring. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And then they actually did find salmon that had returned to the river, and they did stock salmon. So they took salmon from Scottish rivers and they put them in the Thames, and it wasn't those salmon that they found. It was actually salmon from a stream fairly close to the Thames that had repopulated the Thames. And that's because it's more similar environment. Like those fish that repopulated from an adjacent river were used to that, the soils and the sort of the environment of the Thames River more than the salmon from Scotland. So, and I love one of the researchers, I can't remember his name offhand, but one of my favorite quotes is, if we get the river right, the fish will do the rest. Like clean up our mess, and then nature will do the rest. Nature will reintroduce itself. It's not up to us to reintroduce the salmon. It's up to us to clean up our pollution.
Yes, I heard this from your TEDx talk. I love this line. I thought you're the one who coined it.
No, it wasn't me. No, that was a researcher, one of the British biologists.
This is an excellent line, I would say.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
It's about getting the river system right, then the fish will do the rest. So how can this idea will be applied to other environmental issues?
Well, if we give nature just a little bit of room, then it will come back. And we kind of saw this during COVID, when people weren't driving as much or people weren't flying as much. A number of different systems started to recover. So there was less roadkill, for example, less animals hit on highways, and some of their populations came back. So we really need to just back off a little bit, clean up, and everybody can do something, within their own space, because everybody ultimately is connected to an ocean somewhere, no matter where you live. Water that falls where you live, even if you're on a balcony of a high rise, if it stays as water and runs off, if it stays as water, it will ultimately get to an ocean. A lot of it evaporates, it's taken up by a fish or a plant or whatever, but some of that water also stays as water and hits an ocean. So if we pollute it, that pollution is global.
Yeah.
So we really just be careful about using pesticides, fertilizers, plant native plants, things that we can do in our own space. And our environmental issues are from cumulative effects. It's from everybody's individual actions. And it looks huge because, as we've said, there's a lot of people on the planet. But if, by the same token, if everyone does their own space in their own scale, then that also accumulates to something really big.
Yep. Very true. So, ma'am, you used a phrase, everything is connected. I love that. I would like to share something that connect with that. I was at an event where I listened to speeches by Dr. Santosh Padhi sir, a renowned medical doctor and a public health officer from our state, who is actively involved with the government in preventing various diseases caused by the mosquitoes by introducing some really innovative solution. So while interacting with him, I asked him, sir, why not just eradicate all the mosquitoes at once? Why we are not focusing on finding a way to do that? Because mosquitoes are responsible for killing lakhs of people every year, while predators like lions and tigers come nowhere close to mosquitoes. He replied, that's precisely what we are working on, but completely eradicating them from the planet is simply not possible. However, even hypothetically, if we could do that, we may never know what would happen to our ecology. Many insects and birds depend on mosquito. If we eradicate them, those birds will die, those insects will die, which will affect other species that rely on those insects and birds. We could face a domino effect leading to the ecological collapse. Of course, we need to find a balance. If we don't manage the mosquito population, it could grow uncontrollably, which would be detrimental to both us and the surrounding environment. It's crucial that one form of life does not dominate over another. Just like you mentioned, everything is connected.
Yeah.
So even if we could eliminate mosquito, it doesn't mean that we should. So my question is how this interconnected perspective influence our approach to climate change and environmental conservation.
Yeah. Yeah, the mosquitoes are kind of the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
And if we take the bottom out, then we know what happens to a pyramid. If you take the base out, you certainly get a smaller pyramid. In some cases, you get a pyramid that completely collapses. And so we can't predict how all of the different consequences of that kind of connection. So, with climate change, it's the same sort of thing where, if I decide to buy a giant car and drive it, everywhere, I won't see the Arctic ice that melts, for example, or I won't see, a polar bear that can't find prey, because it's at a different place and a different scale. And so we need to just understand intuitively, like right in our hearts, that we are connected right through the whole planet, and make decisions from there rather than what we can see, and rather than like the immediate benefit. Oh, I won't get, a mosquito-borne disease. I mean, and that obviously that's horrible. But if I eradicate all mosquitoes, then that's also horrible. Like one way or the other, something horrible. So we have to find solutions that aren't the extreme, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Everything is connected.
Yeah. Even if we can't see it.
Yep. I have seen many people who are against this pollution and all, but sometimes they unknowingly contribute to this problem. Pollution and the climate change is a very slow process. As you mentioned, they can't see the bigger picture. If you drive a car, it doesn't, you don't see that it will kill a polar bear in Arctic region. So that's why they not realize how serious the issue is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the problem is at a different scale, right? We're operating at the scale of our life, like our house and our city, but the changes are global.
Yep. So, ma'am, what message would you like to share to those people who are doing this directly or indirectly without knowing without acknowledging the bigger picture, what is actually happening?
Well, really, it's to me, the first step is really stopping to admire our planet and just connect with our planet in a way that I don't know how to put it into words, but in a way that we really feel, yeah, we're here on this incredible planet that's in a universe that's so large we can't even imagine it, and just put our sort of lives into perspective so that we can take a bit of time and just, if we admire the earth, if we're in awe of some of the things that it does for us, then it takes less urgency out of the scurry of our life and economy, and brings it back to what's real with respect to our planet, and what we really need in our lives versus what we want. If we connect with nature, it gives us I think a sense of wonder, awe, and also humility. We as a species need quite a bit more humility. We're not running this planet. We're part of it, and our needs are not number one. Our needs are important, but they're part of a planet that's important. And so it's just a matter of maybe slowing down a little bit to think about the connection, what we need versus what the planet needs, what we want versus what the planet needs. And, just a little bit of time and appreciation can change an attitude in a way that science and, social media, all of that stuff, it takes a different tone, if you want.
Yep, absolutely. I just remember one analogy which Elon Musk once given is what he has given is not appropriate to say, but I will put it in a little different way. Just imagine like we are in a big swimming pool and you just throwing one toxic chemical to the other end of the swimming pool, hoping that it will not come to you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unrealistic because, if we're living in a swimming pool, if it doesn't get to us, then it will get to our children, or it will get to our friend, or we'll get to someone in another country we don't know but was going to cure cancer, right? Like, Because we're all there's a consequence.
Yep.
Really, that's another way of saying no matter what we do, there is a consequence. So we have to be careful what we do.
Yep. We are thinking that if somewhere in Sierra Leone, if there is something wrong with it, people often think that it will not affect North America, it will not affect Asia or any other part of the world because it's only happening in some part of Africa, right? But once we see the bigger picture, we will realize that it will affect everyone, not just one place or country. So ultimately, it boils down to one thing, that is everything is connected. So hashtag everything is connected.
Yeah. Hashtag everything is connected. And so from one perspective, it can be a bit overwhelming, thinking, oh my goodness, everything's connected. And yes, what goes on in Sierra Leone has an effect. And and if you feel helpless, like, oh, I can't do anything about that, then bring it back to your own space. Everything is connected. You can do what you do within your own space, and that's important.
Yep.
So you can turn the scale back to one that's manageable for you. And rather than feeling overwhelmed, you feel empowered because there is lots that you can do within your own space.
Yep, absolutely. So, ma'am, can we talk about your book?
Oh, yes, I'd love to talk about my book.
Yeah. So, what inspired you to, writing a children's book?
Yeah, so it's a children's book called A Tale of Two Planets. And what inspired it is really along the lines of some of the things we've already talked about. Like I was thinking, what if we lived on a planet that didn't automatically work for us? Like what if when it rained, the water didn't flow to oceans? Or what if there was no wind? Or what if our plants didn't have their own pollen, or our leaves didn't degrade to make plant food? What would that be like? And so there's a planet called Retha, which is Earth all mixed up, where the creatures, they're whooshidoos, which is a word my son, when he was little, used to describe aliens. I said, what are whooshidoos? And he said, well, aliens. I said, oh, that's a great word. So the whooshidoos have to make wind, and they have to make their own pollen, whereas it's compared to Earth, which the whooshidoos call the magic planet, where all these things just work automatically and everything's interconnected. And they read bedtime stories about Earth, the magic planet. And they laugh because they think it can't possibly be real. But there's one little whooshido, Anag, who does believe in Earth and finds answers to some of the questions that whooshidoos have, like what are the special creatures that carry pollen from plant to plant. So, it's just really a story about how incredible our planet is. And the whooshidoos love their planet, even though if they've worked really, really, really hard to keep it going, they love it because it's home. So, I guess there's an obvious little message there.
Yep.
And when I read it, I've read it in different schools here in Ottawa, and the kids get it right away. If I say, what's the story about? And they'll say, oh, we're so lucky to live on Earth, or, oh, we have a magic planet, which it is. It is magic.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds beautiful, ma'am.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Yep. It's available. I have a website for it called ataleoftwoplanets.com, and it's TWO, Tale, ATALEOFTWOPLANETS.com.
So, ma'am, you are engaged in so many things, and even in writing also. So, how your typical day usually look nowadays?
Well, I don't really have a typical day. When I work on consulting projects, I work from my home office. I teach part-time at the University of Ottawa, and so I go into campus for that. I do spend quite a bit of time in online meetings. I do have a garden that I've made for pollinators. So I had a monarch butterfly, which they're a butterfly that fly from Central America all the way up to Canada and back in their life cycle. Just incredible insects. So I had some monarchs in my backyard. So yeah, and I have two sons that and my family members that I spend time with as well. So yeah, I can't say that I have a typical day though. Depends on the season and what my projects and contracts are at the time.
Yep. That is very interesting, ma'am. So, ma'am, we are on the final segment of our podcast where I will ask you some quick question and you have to answer as fast as you can.
Okay. Like a test?
It's a rapid fire.
Okay.
We call it instant insights. So, ma'am, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay then. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Cats or dogs?
Ooh, do I have to pick? Oh, cat? No, dogs, I guess.
Okay. Best way to start your day.
Um, in the summer, walking out in my garden, just grounding a bit. That doesn't work as well in the winter.
Yep. Beach or mountains?
Mountain.
City or countryside?
Oh, countryside.
Blue or green?
Blue. Water.
Most used app on your phone?
Oh boy. Does email count?
No, that is work related
No.
other than your work.
Okay, Duolingo.
Duolingo. So which language you're learning?
I've tried French, Portuguese, and
Yeah.
Japanese.
So what's your motto through learning the French? Would you like to consume their literature or is communicate with French people?
Yeah, it's more communications with francophones in Canada,
Hmm.
and also when if I travel to France, you know, that's it's nice to be able to at least say, hello and ask some basic questions in French.
That's interesting. Early bird or night owl?
Oh, early bird. Yeah,
Introvert or extrovert?
introvert.
What is your go-to stress relief method?
Besides chocolate, a walk.
A walk. Best way to spend your weekend?
Oh, well, with my sons, maybe having a barbecue. Uh, yeah, or out in a cottage area with my sister has a cottage.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask you about that. How was your experience in the cottage you went last week,
Oh,
right?
it was fantastic.
Great. So you
Yeah,
often
it was
go to
fun.
cottage in every 1 month or two?
Yeah, in the summer, my I have a number of friends, and my sister has a cottage, so it's just very relaxing. Get out of the city and relax by the
Yeah.
water.
So, ma'am, how's the weather in Ottawa in the winter? I mean, the peak winter.
Well, lately it hasn't been as cold in the last 10 years or so. Like it used to get to minus 30 or minus 25 fairly regularly, maybe even minus 30. And lately it's been kind of going from minus 5 to plus 1 or 2. And the problem with that is when it goes above zero, everything melts, all of the snow, and then it goes back down below zero again and it freezes and you can hardly walk. Everything's so slippery. So we do get some nice snow though. Actually love winter. I love it when it's cold more than when it's hot.
Yep. So what is the peak temperature in summer?
32 is the 30, 32.
Hmm.
But it's very humid in Ottawa. So sometimes the humidex, even if it's like today, it's supposed to go up to 28. But with a humidex, it's more like 30, 32, something like that.
Cute. So, ma'am, if you could change three things about the world, what would it be?
We would change our economy to recognize that there are planetary limits. I would change the appreciation for how amazing our planet is. And what else would I change? I would change the way we expand cities so that there's more protected areas, so like along beaches and in fields, so that there's more connected habitat.
Interesting.
Small things.
Yeah. Small thing will make big impact.
Well, changing the economy is actually a
Yeah,
pretty
that is
huge thing. Okay.
So travel back in time or forward in time?
Maybe forward. If I was allowed to travel back in time and change things, I guess maybe I would do that, but that's a hard choice.
Yeah.
I guess forward.
If you could have a dinner guest, dead or alive, who would it be?
Maybe Einstein. I think he would be pretty interesting because he had a philosophy as well as a science background.
Absolutely. So, ma'am, best way to handle success?
Well, not take it personally, first of all, because anyone's reaction or activities are a reflection of them and their values and their beliefs. It's not about me, it's about them. So, any form of discrimination is a reflection of somebody else. So yeah.
What about failure? Best way to handle failure?
Well, to believe that everybody has experiences with failure, and the thing is to learn from it, and not like true failure is doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like failing at something once is a life lesson.
Yep, absolutely. Best gift you have ever received?
Oh, hugs. Hugs are the best.
One thing you like to learn?
I would love to be good at a language, like really good. I don't seem to have an aptitude for, to just really be fluent in French.
Who inspire you the most?
My siblings inspire me. They have different skill sets from me. And my mother is also very inspirational for me. I have friends that I admire as well, that are inspirational. So a whole range of people that have been in my life.
Best compliment you have ever received?
I've had, I think, a compliment from a student of in a course of mine that said that what they learned from me changed their perspective on environment.
Favorite book?
Oh, well, A Tale of Two Planets, besides that one.
Yeah.
What is my favorite book? Lately, my favorite book is The Hidden Sacred Past, Scotland's Hidden Sacred Past. It's by an author, Freddie Silva, and it goes into the history of the stone monoliths in Scotland. I love that book, and how it's a 10,000-year history. It's not it's not a 1,000-year history.
That's interesting. So, ma'am, have you read a book called *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, who is from Israel?
No, I haven't read it. I've seen it on bookshelves and I've looked at it, but no, I haven't read that one.
I would definitely recommend you if you're into this. I mean, you just mentioned that 10,000 of history. In that book, he mentioned from the beginning of the humanity, when we were in Sapiens, the Homo sapiens.
Right.
Yeah. Favorite movie?
I like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Really?
The first one. Yeah.
That's completely unusual.
It's so silly. I like Rocket.
Okay, that's interesting. So you like any other Marvel movies besides Guardians of Galaxy? Have you seen the Avengers?
I like the first Iron Man.
Yeah, same here, man. A big DJ fan.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So, ma'am, if you weren't an engineer, what would you be?
I would probably be a book author. I think it was really fun to.
You are already a book author.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you said if I wasn't an engineer,
Okay,
I guess
that makes sense.
true. That's why.
Yep.
I would probably be a biologist then, if I'm not allowed to be a book author.
Interesting. So, if you could solve one environmental issue overnight, what would it be?
Well, it would definitely have something to do with biodiversity decline, which I think is at least as serious as climate change, possibly more serious. So just to reinstate habitat globally, like, nature needs half is one of the movements that was started by a biologist. Nature needs half of its habitat. We can have the other half. One species gets half the planet. All the other species get the other half. Yeah, that's what I would change.
Favorite project you have worked on?
I really enjoyed my time managing water infrastructure. So the potable water system, I had some great staff, and I did that for about 6 years in one particular job, and maybe that's coming to mind because it did last so long. Like, I've had a number of projects that I've loved to do, but they're shorter term, whereas that was there's something sort of not only enjoyable but rewarding about providing essential services to a community.
So, ma'am, if you could implement one change in urban water management globally, what would it be?
It would be to change the way we manage stormwater so that we pay attention to its temperature, how fast we let it go, how much of it we have to collect. Like, it would change. It would be to do with green infrastructure.
What is the most exciting trend in environmental engineering today?
Well, the idea of sponge cities, it's been around, the concept isn't new, but the term is fairly new. And just thinking of a city as a sponge and ways to make cities collect water and reuse water, I think that's a pretty exciting trend.
I have seen in China, if I'm not mistaken, they have implemented in large scale.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And there's other like low impact development and SIDS is what it's called in Europe. Sustainable infiltrate. Actually, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's not a new idea, but I think the term sponge city really encapsulates what it's about.
So, ma'am, what do you think? What is the most important skill for a environmental engineer?
It's not even a skill so much as an attitude that anything we build, like civil engineers, environmental engineers are, working with the environment. We're not in control of it. So I think a skill that's really important is working within a team, like, a biologist, a geomorphologist, some kind of a social scientist, to understand people's reaction. Like being able to work within a team is a skill set that everyone in the workforce really needs now, because nobody has all of the answers. No single person knows enough to get all of the answers. And we really need to work as part of a team and to understand when we don't know enough to pull somebody in who does, to really build teams as well. Super important skill.
Favorite tool or technology you use in your work?
Oh, well, it's Zoom and that kind of thing. I use those technologies. I have used R, which is it's a open source statistical analysis tool. Very useful, very frustrating as well. And, the typical sort of software, Word and PowerPoint, that kind of thing. Nothing too exciting, I guess.
Actually, I forgot to ask you one important question. So what do you think how AI will help us to tackle this climate change?
Well, I think AI is useful for sort of gathering information. I think we have to be careful because it doesn't know more than put into it. Like it's not magic. It's collecting information that's available and synthesizing it and spitting out.
Yeah, they say the garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So it can help us in terms of, analyzing big data and, that kind of thing. But wow, we really have to be careful about before we just automatically assume that what it's put out is correct.
Yep. Absolutely. According to you, what is the biggest misconception people have about climate change?
Well, there's a number, I guess, that it's recent and that it's easily fixed. Driving a different vehicle or, all those little things make a difference, but it's been going on for a long time. And it's going to take a collective effort to address the changes.
I have seen people saying that climate change is nothing but is a propaganda by the government to distract people from other important issues,
Well, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories, but I think most people can look around now and see the changes happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No wonder we are having a cyclone, earthquake. This is how, must have been related to climate change, right? One way or other.
I'm not sure about earthquakes. I don't think we know enough about the
maybe the cyclone is one of the prime example of the climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had cyclones before, obviously, but it's the frequency of them is increasing and the severity also. How strong they are. Has changed.
Mother Earth is indicating us by saying that there is something wrong with you, human. You are doing something wrong with planet. So that's why this thing is happening.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, most challenging part of your job?
Well, working in environment can be challenging because sometimes there is a lot of bad news, and so the challenging part, I think, for me and for almost anyone working in environment is making sure to re-energize, like to continue to maintain the energy, to keep working in the field. And personally, I rejuvenate through the beauty of our planet. I think natural beauty is restorative in a way that it's not logical. It doesn't make sense. You can't scientifically measure it, but to me, it's very real.
most rewarding part of your job?
Well, seeing some of what I've recommended to, through projects being implemented, that's rewarding. When I'm teaching, it's rewarding to actually see that students have learned about interconnectedness. Yeah, those would be the most rewarding things.
Yeah. So according to you, what the best way to learn a new skill?
Jump right in. You can read about things or think about them, but to learn a new skill, you really have to test drive it.
So, ma'am, that's the end of the rapid fire.
Okay, good.
I hope you had fun.
Yeah, it was good. It wasn't really as scary as it sounded.
So, ma'am, one last question of the podcast. What's the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Follow your heart. It sounds, cryptic, but really, I need to do things that I personally find rewarding. And if I don't do that, then, life becomes kind of dreary. So that's advice for anybody, I think.
Follow your heart.
Yeah.
Follow your instinct. Don't follow your brain. Sometimes it may make you do the thing which may be not good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it might seem logical at the time, but in the end, it wasn't what you really needed to do or be.
Yep. For me, well, ma'am, for the long time, I wanted to be a podcaster. This year I started. Due to other work, I couldn't able to give time to this podcast journey because, this is quite hectic journey. Not hectic. I actually love this process of being a podcaster, but you have to commit so much time, But my heart is always saying to me, Sri, do it. But my brain says, see, you cannot, you have other work to do also. But anyway, I listened to my heart and started my journey as a podcaster this year.
Oh, good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, that's the end of the podcast. Any final thought?
Okay. No, well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been fun to speak with you.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody just finds something that they can do in their own space to make a difference for the climate, for water.
Yep. Absolutely.
Hello, everyone. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to Shree's podcast, The Billion Insights. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to rate in 5 stars if you enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights and experiences with us today.
Thank you.
Your perspective on environmental conservation, climate change, and the interconnectedness of our world have given us a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure, Shree. Thank you for your insightful questions.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to have another podcast and some other day.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good.
And to our listener, make sure to check out Dr. Mary Trudeau's book and her TEDx talk. All the links can be found in the description. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Billion Insight podcast. Until next time, stay curious and remember to take care of our planet. This is Sri, your host, signing out. Peace.
Okay, that's great. I love that. Stay curious. That's it.